Conservation. Conservation is the focus of Charles Fillmore's lesson for today during the Lenten season. It is conservation in our lives and the corresponding quote from Isaiah. So will be the word that I speak. It will not fail to do what I plan it to do, what I send it to do. It will not fail, said the Lord. Allow me, please, to share with you a dream that I had one night. I had a dream about getting to a long distance Greyhound bus and climbing on. And in my ever-present, seemingly, earbuds, I heard a childhood song. The wheels on the bus go round and round, round and round. And then we pulled out of the station. I briefly scanned the other passengers, and unlike others, I realized that I had no baggage with me, which I normally would have had. It was unlike me, even for a very short trip. But somehow, I wasn't concerned. I was moving and grooving and traveling light. And even my music became more hip and happening, stirring my blood. And it seemed that all was right with the world, just as it was. Somehow, when I woke up from the dream, there seemed a warm and enveloping connection of sorts with my eldest sister, Connie. Connie passed away years ago. She had once told me about a time when she and her Vietnam draft dodging consultant friends spontaneously tried to make it to the Woodstock Music Festival. Those of us of an age remember so well. They decided to take off with little planning, few provisions, and even less money. As luck would have it, as the story goes, it was in that moment, halfway there, when their van broke down. And they never did make it to Woodstock, she said, except in spirit. She shared with me, and with a big smile on her face, a big smile on her face. And they had a great trip, nonetheless. My sister shared that she still felt as one with all those who actually did make it there to Woodstock in person. My friends, to be honest, back then, I didn't get it. I just didn't get it. She was 10 years older than I was, and I just didn't always understand her choices back then. But today, when I get these flashes of memory and I'm telling her story, I feel like I am preserving her memory, sustaining her presence, and some of her very, very unique gifts to the world and to the grown-up me just a little bit more. Today's Lenten themes, as written by Charles Fillmore, our founder of Unity, is on spiritual conservation. Formally, conservation means to preserve, manage, or sustain the energy of a given system. Just as my storytelling preserves my sister's presence. This month, we can celebrate another more ancient and historically important act of preservation as we celebrate St. Patrick's Day. Now, I can't attest to the chasing of the snakes out of Ireland, but I do know that Patrick's fellow monks are largely responsible for preserving our Christian sacred text, our Bible. Through the laborious task of making handmade copies, they saved the key copies that survived through the dark ages. A marvelous, marvelous act of preservation, carrying forward words of truth in another time. God bless them, one and all. So I got to thinking, and this week I asked my husband, I asked him if there was an engineering term that meant something was unchanging, sustained in form. And right away he said, oh yes, it would be described as stiff, he said in design engineer speakage, gathering and bemoaning when something just isn't stiff is something that engineers talk about. It just isn't stiff. It seems that they love things like, well, like railroad tracks, for instance, that lay there unmoving, unchanging. And with a smile on his face, he said, just as stiff as can be. Now, my friends, this wasn't actually the sacred term I was seeking for today's talk. In fact, that visual image of a bunch of engineers wringing their hands and worrying about making this stiff, well, it just wasn't what I was going for. A bunch of stiffs made me think of a bunch of folks without a sense of humor. My friends, I am very much not engineering material, in case you haven't noticed. And thinking about so many engineers that are in my life, quite frankly, well, it made me long for the yoga laughter group we had years ago at another Unity church. It's a group that encourages laughter and surprise and joy and the practice of shifting our mood through loving, playful group laughter. Something, I dare say, which is often missing in groups of engineers, in my humble experience. And to my loving husband, I apologize. My humble apologies. As wonderful as they are, including, again, the many engineers that have turned up in my life over time, yet most of them are so very, very serious most of the time. And then I realized that in life, we really need both, don't we? We need to find a balance between preservation, the unchanging, steadfast quality of some parts of our lives, right along with the management of new energy. The kind of management required for a loving, open, evolving system like our own lives. Our earthly life systems require management that allows for both growth and change over time. Over time, we can learn to see things with beginner's mind, with fresh eyes. Picture this in your mind, with your feet planted firmly on the ground and gazing out at train tracks, looking from ground level. When we look at that individual train track, well, the engineers are quite right. Little changes occur over time. This is the epitome of a stiff system. If you view the tracks, however, from a higher view, from the top of the hill, for instance, there are very many individual ties on the tracks, placed one after another. It gives you a fresh impression. You may readily observe that you discern from the elevated height that there is a slightly shifting angle, creating a train line that clearly bends and winds as needed throughout the countryside. Moment by moment, it may be hard to detect ways in which we each are changing and are growing and releasing old baggage in order to make room for new life to come, and taking the needed time to grow, to learn, to grow into new ways of being. But life, if viewed retrospectively, reveals winding turns, shifting angles over time. We begin to look back at individual moments of time, individual actions and choices. we can begin to see larger patterns. We begin to see ever more clearly that we are a part of an open-ended life system that grows and learns and transforms over time. And praise the Lord for that. Sometimes we can see points in our lives when we clearly are intentional and determined to alter the course of our lives. And we can each also see times when little change occurs, when our views and our habits stay the same for long, long stretches of time. Times when we felt perhaps like our souls have stiffened and dried up. My friends, it is in that very moment that we become vulnerable enough to open up, to accept help, welcoming a fusion of new life, new thoughts, new ways of being in the world. Hopefully, we can all look back at our lives and pick up moments when we intentionally decided to exercise our free will. Times when we realized we were being called more deeply into a stream of well-being. Times when we choose to redirect our attention, redirect our energy in order to make it a better, more fulfilling life journey. Times when we decided to let go of our own baggage and get going with all that we truly are and have to share yet with the world. My friends, it is in that magical, mystical moment when we find ourselves already on the bus, headed in the right direction, having all that we really need. Times when we are opening more fully to the divine flow, moving through us, expressing as us. Times when we are moving and grooving. May God bless us. For these are the times when we are growing and we know it. Times when we are growing and we appreciate it. Times when we aren't always sure of our destination, but firmly feel somehow that we are traveling through a place where we are meant to be and doing what we are meant to be doing. Even if right now, why is a bit mysterious. For these, my friends, are called the juicy times. This is a notion that comes from the 12th century, written by one of my teachers in thought, Hildegard of Bingen, who calls this experience veriditas. Excuse me if I'm not speaking Latin correctly, which means the greening of our souls. The greening of our souls. The times when we welcome light into our souls and gently allow a natural transformation of energy to occur within us. New stages of life to unfold, and creative new forms of life to emerge through us naturally and easily. What is that process really? What are we talking about? Some sort of new age photosynthesis of the soul? And aside, my friends, do any of you remember the old Andy Griffith recording called What It Was Football? It came out from an Andy Griffith show, I believe, describes the view of someone who has never seen a football game. The confusion on the field, seemingly absurd to one unfamiliar with the game, with the rules. Well, my friends, what is life? What is this mysterious game of football? The game of life. People suddenly starting and stopping and jumping up on each other, and whistles blowing, and cheers and music. Indeed, our lives are just as mysterious, mystical. And between birth and then our existence on earth, this body vehicle carries us through. It is the kind of life that is experienced as having a beginning, a middle, and an end. But we are hard pressed to find anything in the world that doesn't change at some point. Yet most cultures have this story that it has been preserved throughout the ages of another kind of life, a story of a resurrecting God man, like our story of Jesus Christ, that seems to be timeless. It is the story of resurrection. It is the story of eternal life. We can barely begin to understand this view of life, in which birth and death are opposites, but life itself has no opposite. It is the energy, the ceaseless life force flowing into the core of our beings that is unchanging. While our recognition of this eternal, abiding presence may seem to come and go, my friends, it is ever present and unchanging. Now, with this revelation, it gets some folks all shook up and headed to Graceland. What do you do with an understanding like this? What change is needed to bring your life into fulfillment? When you begin to see yourself as a growing, transforming, conscious, beautiful being that serves, my friends, one and all, as an expression of spirit. How does that land in your heart when I tell you that your mission is to learn to be a good conservator of life force? You have been given this through the grace of God. What do you have at the ready? What do you receive now that you can preserve, maintain this vital and unlimited energetic force that is coming to live through you as you? Are you willing? Are you willing to care for this sacred life force within each and every one of us? Are you willing to behold and delight in the fullness of God's grace? Are you willing to be an expression of love in all circumstances, with all resources of body, mind, and spirit? And if you are still hanging in there with me, moving and grooving, let me ask you this. How is God expressing through you, taking form through you? What talents and treasures are you willing to share with the world, my friends? For in the giving, you will have been blessed yourself. I wish you well on this adventure of a lifetime. Blessed be. Blessed be. Namaste.